Today we're going to be talking about what I think is more difficult in 68 Whiskey AIT, EMT phase, or Whiskey phase. But without further ado, let's get to it. What is up, guys? Ben Allen back again with another video, and like I just said, we're going to be talking about what, in my personal opinion, is harder, right? In 68 Whiskey AIT, whether it's EMT phase or Whiskey phase. For those of you that don't know, those are the two primary phases of 68 Whiskey AIT. EMT phase comes first. That is where you take your module test, you study for the nremt, which is the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians. That is what certifies you as an EMTB in 68 Whiskey AIT to progress through your training while you're there at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. And then after you finish that EMT phase and you go through the CPR and all that, you do Whiskey phase, right? Like, you pass the NREMT, cool, you're done. Now you get to go on to the fun stuff, right? But also probably the more strenuous physically stuff, right? It's where you're going to be learning more of the Combat Medic role of 68 Whiskey, right? And we're going to jump into all of that and more. But before we do, be sure to like this video so it pushes out to a larger audience, and subscribe if you aren't already. I did 4 years active duty. I did a year and a half in the reserves. So if you guys have questions about either or, feel free to hit me up either in my Discord, which is linked down below, or on my Instagram at the Ben Allen, also linked down below. Feel free to ask any questions y'all may have, and yeah, let's jump straight into it. So to start off, I'll give you guys both an overview of EMT phase and Whiskey phase in 68 Whiskey AIT. EMT phase, right? We'll start with that because that is the first phase of AIT for 68 Whiskeys, and that is pretty much broken up into various modules, right? Each covering a different topic, whether it's OBGYN, cardiovascular, nervous system, things like that, right? You'll be tested on those sometimes once a week, twice a week. It's very, very fast paced. I believe EMT phase for us when I went through was like 6 weeks long, so it is not a lot of time at all. AIT in total, I believe, is around 16-18 weeks long. If it hasn't changed since I went through, right, in 2015, but it is very fast paced. It is not like a regular NREMT course on the civilian side. There's a lot of information that they are giving you. They give you a big old book, right, that you have to study, put hours into. It is very stressful. You're going to be getting very little sleep, right? At least most people that I knew and went to AIT with, we did not sleep a whole lot, because mornings you wake up at 4:30, you do your PT, you come back, you shower, get ready, and then you're off to breakfast at like 6:30, and you're in class by like maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock. And it's really early, and you're sleepy, you're fighting the sleep deprivation. So just to study and just take in this material that they're giving you is a challenge on its own, right? The material itself can be difficult depending on your level of, I guess, studiousness, right? Studiousness, that's a word, maybe. If you study, you put in the time, it should be okay. I knew nothing medical whatsoever going into AIT. I studied the material. I passed every test first try. I passed my NREMT first try, but it was stressful studying. And there were some people that did not pass their tests on the first try, that did not pass the NREMT on the first try. And if you don't pass a test, you get one retest, and if you fail the retest, you get recycled, which means you go from the company that you're currently in into a different company, right? That's barely starting up. So basically, you're saying bye to all your friends that you've made in that company, and you're going to another one that's barely starting. So you get another opportunity to restudy, relearn everything, and then take whatever test you failed again after failing it a second time. You do not want to get recycled. It's very disheartening. It's a big blow to just your whole progress as a soldier, as a medic. I highly recommend getting it done the first try. If you can, make a study group, go to the study session. Sometimes they'll host study hall, go to study halls, do that. It'll help you guys out a lot, right? The first part of EMT phase is kind of like the CPR. At least I know for sure they throw CPR in there. You're going to get tested on it. You're going to be practicing on the dummies. It's actually pretty fun. It's very informative, very cool to learn, and it could come in handy on the civilian side should you ever need it. That test in itself really isn't that difficult. It's more about respirations, how many times you're pushing down. It's really not a whole lot that goes into that, so that's fairly easy, probably an easy pass for most people, right? But the modules themselves, depending on the subject, it could be very difficult. There were some people that did really well with OBGYN and, you know, maybe struggled with cardiovascular stuff because there's a bunch that goes into it. You're talking about like the superior vena cava, you know, shit like that, right? Like, it probably doesn't make sense if you've never studied like anything medical whatsoever. But yeah, and then once you do that, you do like some hands-on skills testing that you have to do, like a medical assessment, you know, things like that. Hands-on isn't that difficult. It can be though if you're the type of person that gets nervous when somebody's like grading you and you like forget your steps and stuff and you miss something. Sometimes you can miss a thing here or there. That's not like a automatic failing criteria, right? An automatic no-go. So it's not that bad, and that's like EMT in a nutshell. You go through all the modules, you go through the whole book, you learn everything you could possibly learn, right? And then you take the nremt. The nremt is an adaptive test, meaning it's going to be going based off of you. If you're doing really good, chances are, this isn't the case for like everyone, if you're doing really good and it has assessed that you know your shit, you're good, you're smart, whatever, you got it, it could stop you at like 75 questions. But if maybe it's still guessing like, oh, you know, they've gotten a lot right, but they've also gotten some wrong, so let's give them a few more questions, and it could go up to 120. There was people that got 120 and failed. There was people that got 120 and passed, and vice versa for 75 questions. Either you do so bad and it's just like, oh, there's no redemption, it fails you at 75 questions, right? But the best advice I ever got for the nremt is go in order of your trauma assessment. Like, if you go in order, and if you don't know, oxygen and transport is usually always a solid answer. At least that's what I found out to be true. And then you finish the test, right? It's timed, I believe. You go through that, and then sometimes they'll tell you your results like a couple hours later, but if it's on the weekend, like a Friday that you take it, you're gonna have to wait till Monday. And that's what happened with us. I was stressing, bro. I had nightmares about this test, thinking I failed, but I passed first try, thank God. And it was the stress was over, right? That was like, you know, a big part of AIT in the beginning. So now moving on to whiskey phase, right? You've got EMT phase out of the way. Whiskey phase is pretty fun. It can be fun, right? It's going to be a lot more physically demanding than EMT phase was, because this is where they're going to start throwing in blood labs, you know, the drags that you can do, the different carries you can do as a medic. You're going to be outside a lot more, you know, weather permitting, right? Doing your trauma assessment, right? And the trauma assessment is your bread and butter as a 68 whiskey. This is like the main thing that when you get to a new unit, your NCOs might test you on. This is like this, they want to see how fast you can do it and how efficiently you can do it. And you're gonna be practicing this a lot outside, doing groups of 3, I believe is what we did. We'd have like one person being the casualty, one person being like fire support, the other person being the medic. So you got to drag them to safety, you got to start your assessment, you're in full gear most of the time. In the sun it sucks, in the cold it sucks, right? Because it's very demanding. You're gonna be doing a lot of moving around. But before you get into all the physically demanding stuff, there is still some like classroom environment settings, but this is no longer taught by civilians. This is taught by, you know, NCOs, by soldiers themselves. Like the whiskey instructors is what they're called. And usually each class has about 2 or 3 instructors. They break it up, they teach you guys all the basics. They go through like limited primary care, you know, the field care, all your field craft stuff you'll go through. They'll teach you about nasal pharyngeal airways, you know, those little tubes that go in the nose, the oral airways, you know, intravenous stuff, circulation stuff, just pretty much everything you're gonna need to learn. And once you learn those step by step, right, they'll talk about MPAs, which are the tubes that go in your nose to help you breathe. And then you'll do hands-on. You'll do that, yada yada, and you put it all together basically in a trauma assessment that you do outside. You can practice it inside too sometimes, and it's just a lot of steps to learn. There's a lot more individual skills that you're going to be learning, right? Like the gunshot wounds, the occlusive dressing, the NPA is one, how to do a saline lock or start an actual saline line. There's a lot, and you're going to be tested on those as well, kind of like the all skills that you were tested on in EMT phase and shit. And so it's a lot to remember, plus it adds the physically demanding aspect to it, because you're actually gonna be dragging casualties, carrying casualties, things like that. So it just depends. With that said, once you finish whiskey phase, you're pretty much like done. You're almost to the home stretch of being done with 68 Whiskey AIT. You do have Camp Bullis, which is like you go out to the field for a few days, a week maybe, just depending. They change it sometimes here and there, and you're just there in the field. You're putting everything you've learned to use. You're doing different patrol days. You're doing moulage days. You're doing BAS days. Like, it's just, I know I'm saying a lot of acronyms, right? But you'll get it when you go to 68 Whiskey. Just know that when you go to Camp Bullis, it's a culminating event. You're going to take everything you've learned for EMT phase, whiskey phase, put it all together and practice it over the course of, you know, the next couple days to a week, and you're going to be tested on all of this. This is like do or die time, right? You don't want to fail your trauma assessment. You fail it once, you get to go again. You fail it again, you fail. At least that's how it was when I went through. I don't know if it's changed, but that's it, right? That's pretty much AIT in a nutshell. But the primary focus of the video being EMT phase and whiskey phase, which is harder. Me personally, I think EMT phase is harder, just because there's a bigger like stressor involved, and that's the nremt. That test is a monster for some people, right? To me, I passed on the first try. It was still a monster. That test is crazy, and just how fast-paced EMT phase was. Like, you're taking a test on Monday, and then you're doing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of like a new module, new topic of discussion, and then Friday you're taking a test for everything you just learned the past 3-4 days. And then cool, you go to the next week, there's another test, and then the next week there's maybe 1 or 2 tests, and then your finals 100 questions, so it's a lot of memorization. You're gonna be doing a lot of brain dumping too. Like, really, like, you learn the shit and then you kind of just brain dump it, which isn't good. So and then the sleep deprivation, like the first couple weeks of AIT are a lot to get used to, because we're at basic training. You were waking up at maybe 5:30. AIT, we were waking up at 4:30, which is like way earlier. Our formation was at 4:30, so we had to be up by like 4, get ready, go downstairs, do PT, and then you're up from like 4:30 until like 9:30 was like bed check, I believe. So you're just up for hours and hours, and then after that you still got to do you studying. You still got to like learn everything and just go over it. Sometimes they'll give you homework too, which kind of sucks, bro. Like, keep it in the classroom, right? And it's just like so much stress, right? People are freaking out because if you don't pass the nremt the first try, you get 3 tries, I believe. And if you don't pass all 3 tries, you're done. Like, that's it, and you don't move on to whiskey phase. And so say you fail the first time, right? The class is still moving on. Like, they're still going to whiskey phase, so you're still going to be learning whiskey stuff as well as still like studying for the nremt while everybody else has already like moved on. They're not stressing about it, and it just sucks. So you want to pass the first try, and the best way to do that is by studying and getting it like all in there, in your mind, basically. So I think because of that, the nremt itself makes EMT phase harder, because some people might not be book smart, right? They might not study well, they might not test well, and there's a lot of testing, a lot of studying in EMT phase. And you know, it's not to say that whiskey phase was without its own challenges, right? Like, you're gonna be doing a lot more physical activity, but at the same time, I've seen a lot more people struggle with the EMT side of things as opposed to the whiskey stuff. If you're not as strong as the other soldiers or the soldier medics, right, you will get stronger. You're gonna be able to drag these people eventually. You're going to adapt to the physical side of it. But you know, the mental side of EMT phase, to me, seems more strenuous, more stressful, because I didn't see a whole lot of people struggle with whiskey phase. If you couldn't carry somebody, you have a buddy there to help you. You have a lot more like of a team aspect, I guess, in whiskey phase, and it's just more of a go with the flow. Like, you got to just memorize the trauma assessment. You go through it. It's more of muscle memory. The more you do that stuff, the more you'll be able to do it. The easier it is, and it's, to me, easier to get down and pass whiskey phase, because you know, also your instructors are actual soldiers as well, so they get it. They've been through those shoes. The EMT instructors are civilian sometimes, so they may be retired military as well, but you know, you never know. And them, it's just, if you don't pass, you don't pass. Same thing with whiskey phase. If you don't pass, you don't pass. But it seems a little more lighthearted, if that makes sense. But that's the video, guys. I hope that, you know, was informative for you guys. My first video back in like 3 months. I haven't been posting content. I've just been living life, going visiting my family, going to raves, having fun. Just took a little break, but I'm back now. First video back. Don't judge if it's a little rusty, right? I gotta get back into the flow of making videos. But yeah, be sure to like this video if you found it entertaining and informative. Be sure to subscribe if you're new here to the channel, guys. And also in my description box down below, I have my Discord link. There's over 400 people in there that can help answer your questions, that can help you know, guide you on your path in the military. It's very informative and a lot of good people in there that can help you out. Or if you want to ask me a question directly, hit me up on my Instagram at @TheBenAllen. I try to respond to everybody, but I have been slacking on it, so do with that information what you will. But yeah, thank y'all for watching the video. I appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next one. Later.